Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to you all to tonight's meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee. Members are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube pages. And may I take the opportunity this evening to welcome Councillor Andrew Jennings to his first meeting of the committee. Welcome, Councillor. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Item 1, minutes of the previous meeting. Are you all in agreement that I sign the minutes of the previous meetings of the committee, which are the 26th of April and the short meeting on the 17th of May 2023? All those in favour? Yeah. Thank you. Item 2, members' interests. Do members have any interests to declare this evening? No interests? Thank you. Moving on then to item 3, which is the 2022-23 outturn report. Karen Sutton is unable to be with us this evening, so can I ask Oliver to present the report? Thank you, Oliver.
Good evening, members. Unfortunately, Karen Sutton's been taken unwell, so you've got the B team tonight, but I'll do my best to do the report justice. So in front of us this evening, we've got the outturn report for 22-23. Members will see an underspend of £476,000 against the original budget, but a larger swing than we'd normally expect to see in terms of the outturn position of Q3 to Q4. Key driver behind this is macroeconomic factors and challenges in the global market, which saw bluntly higher than expected returns on our holdings in bank accounts, much greater sort of return in terms of interest that we held on our treasury position, and also in relation to the likes of waste, a much better position in terms of the funding we were being paid for recyclers. Where at the start of the year, we were in a position where we were actually paying for recycling material to be taken away. And by the end of the year, it was generating a fairly significant income stream, leading to a £512,000 better performance than anticipated in terms of our overall waste position. The other big change in relation to Q3 largely sits within Councillor Sanderson's area and our strategic planning function. As you'll appreciate, particularly with our major developments, the amount of funding we receive for some of the big developments are very, very significant. And actually, they're often hard to predict as big developers are trying to balance when they make payments for applications of that sort. And there we saw a £300,000 swing between Q3 and Q4, contributing to that big of an expected sort of move from Q3 to Q4, and that positive underspend in terms of the budget as a whole. That's the headline position in terms of the outturn position. But I'm more than happy to take any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Do members have questions regarding the outturn report this evening? Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. My question concerns the return for the waste. Is that likely to continue now, or was that a real bonus? Thank you.
So there are some aspects of the waste budget position that we'd hope to endure. So we worked very hard at being more commercial, and we've outperformed the budget in relation to trade waste and some of the other factors there. We'd expect those figures to persevere and to be enduring benefits. as you would expect with any kind of commodities market, the market around recycling does fluctuate. I wouldn't anticipate it to remain at the position we are at the moment, Councillor Blackwell. So sadly, we would expect to see some sort of drifting back towards towards a less positive position. But at the moment, it still does remain positive, and we're doing all we can to maximise those opportunities.
Thank you, Oliver. Any other questions from members? Councillor Cadbury.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the CIS. Is it CIC? Yeah. An update on commercial investment strategy. Yeah. So my question is, how is it going at the moment?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Kadewere. So the position as outturned last year was a positive one for the commercial investment strategy. So we ended up outturning up on our anticipated position with £765,000 of positive variance in our favour. It does remain an area that we are monitoring closely, as you would expect, as the kind of economic changes are influencing behaviours, particularly in the sort of the private commercial rental market. We've got a new service manager, Liz Wellborn, who's come in to lead our commercial estates team, and we're reviewing all of the arrangements as you'd expect, as we ordinarily do, positively looking to relet empty units and so on. But actually, in terms of the activity last year, we had very positive positions in terms of extending some of our rental agreements, increasing rent where the market would support that. And as the figures show, at the moment, it remains a positive position, but one we're very actively monitoring as we move forward.
Thank you, Oliver. Councillor Gray first, and then Councillor James. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, just building on that. So thank you for that little entree there, because that was one of two areas that I just wanted to pick up on. So thank you. Great to hear new leadership coming in place, because one of the concerns for the year has been obviously Jackie has not been there, and the inference from the narrative on here is that because she hasn't been there and it hasn't been fully staffed, that we've made some savings on things like, for example, maintenance. And obviously we don't want to be getting behind on maintenance, and if there aren't people there, maintenance won't get driven forward, and I know from experience that it needs driving that. So I assume that, multi-part question, I'm afraid, Chairman. So I assume firstly that Liz is going to sort of stock out the rest of the team. More importantly, given that this is not really the finance forum, but more strategic risk, I'm thinking we were talking about last year refreshing the commercial investment strategy. Can we have a timeline for when you think that might happen? And then just completely switching gears, I hear what you say about planning. When I look at this, there's an underspend in planning, I think there's a slight overspend slight underspend in planning, Tom, I think. Chief Planning Officer, additional priority income plus staff savings. The one thing we don't want to be doing in planning at the moment is having staff savings. We need more staff, not less staff. So that's, again, I would highlight that, I think, as a sort of strategic risk for the organisation in terms of getting the right staffing levels in both of those really, really important departments.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Gray. So to turn first to the commercial investment strategy, and your two questions there. I think in Liz Wellborn, it's a really strong appointment for us as an organisation. A number of you will know Jackie Golby well, and the strategic expertise that she brought, a long track record in the commercial sector with Boots and other areas. And Liz Wellborn joins us with a similar kind of track record, having spent a number of years managing the commercial portfolio at the cooperative, so a similar kind of purpose-driven organisation but in the interim, a period at Lincolnshire County Council too. So I think it brings both the commercial side, but also the understanding of how to get things done in the public sector, which will be helpful. To the question about kind of repairs and making sure that the estate remains well managed and the underlying capital values remain strong, I can absolutely reassure there. So a lot of work going on. One of the opportunities being taken at the moment is a significant refresh at the Fareham site that we bought. And whilst there's actually a vacant periods of vacancy, of refreshing and updating the site to ensure that they're kind of enduring longer term returns, there remains strong. So I think hopefully that will put your mind at rest. In terms of the refresh the commercial investment strategy, and members may recall that it was one of the commitments that sat in the corporate plan, action plan that was recently agreed at full council. So that's absolutely there, and Karen Sutton is leading on that along with Liz Wellborn. And I can confirm that the first principles for that refresh should be ready for the end of the summer, so around the September period. And as you'd expect, what we would do is establish a series of principles first of what we're looking for from that strategy. And then, as we did with the last commercial investment strategy, attract the appropriate level of specialist expertise to ensure that you can have the confidence that you will all need to manage the underlying risk that sits with an investment strategy of that sort. So you'll be seeing all of that in due course. And then finally, just turning to your questions about development management. If you look at the first page of the financial performance report, I think one thing that has complicated this slightly is referring to development management in both the underspend and the overspend category, which is a drafting issue and hasn't helped at all. And this is in relation to both aspects of the strategic growth, so what many would know as the old strategic growth function that would sat traditionally under Clara Kerr, being conflated with the development management function, which traditionally sat as part of the Chief Operating Officer. So the underspend relates to the strategic growth aspect, the overspend relates to the development management function and the well-stated challenges we've had around recruitment and retention in that area. And on a personal basis, I meet weekly to review performance against the development management side of the function, recognising the key role that plays in terms of delivery for obviously our residents, but also the economic aspect of making sure that land's being brought forward and we're doing all we can in those areas. So hopefully that answers the questions that you've posed there.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the Executive Councillor, Karen and Sharon, who afforded me a detailed look through these figures on Friday. So I managed to answer a lot of detailed questions then, so I won't bring them up now. But one of the things that Karen said at the time was that the reason this is coming to this panel is due to the knock-on effect, giving some assurance because of the 21-22 accounts not yet being, the audit not being complete. I just wanted to find out, are there any implications over and above reputational that not signing or having the accounts signed off in the normal timescale would bring on the council? Thank you.
An excellent question, Councillor Jennings. So as the committee might recall from the conversation we had last time when we had the external auditors here, the deadline for posting last year's accounts is actually the 31st of May. So that's statutory detail of either posting the accounts or providing clear rationale for why that has not been done. And you may recall as well the external auditor saying the fact that the audit of the 21-22 accounts are not complete is a justifiable reason for not posting the accounts. So the simple answer to your question is no, there is no impact. What we will do is make a very clear statement as why the accounts haven't been posted to the deadline that the government has set, and the rationale that it's the inability of external audit to conclude the audit of the 21-22 accounts, which is the reason for that happening. The other key bit of information is that only one of the councils in Cambridge and Peterborough has yet posted the 21-22 accounts, which was Cambridge City, that were very lucky in getting in early and getting that external audit opinion. So hopefully that puts your mind at rest. I think, again, one of the things I would say is the issue with the timeliness of external audit is not just an issue locally, it is a national issue and one we continue to lobby very strongly for. And as a corporate governance committee, clearly you place a lot of store by that opinion. So we need that in a timely manner, and we keep raising that point with our external lobby groups.
Thank you, Oliver. Councillor House-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to pick up on that point about audit timetables. My understanding is that the auditors who have a big backlog across the country have adopted different approaches towards different councils depending on a number of factors. Could you advise what the current view is as to where we sit in the queue in terms of when our accounts are likely to be completed by the auditors, and what reasons they are giving for progress or lack of progress in respect to Huntingdonshire?
It's a very simple question. I'm not sure I've got quite such a straightforward answer, I'm afraid, which is the overwhelming sort of challenge of all external audit is capacity at the moment. And that's what we hear everywhere is there is insufficient capacity. What I would say is the fact that we have a long history of unblemished accounts, always close on time and everything else means that we're relatively low risk. In terms of our position, there is no particular reason why anyone would look at us differently. I think the only thing that we do, which is potentially a little different from others and changes our profile somewhat, is things like our commercial investment strategy, which, as we've seen today, has done a lot to contribute to our overall general fund and support the activities of Huntingdonshire as a whole. So in terms of that profiling, I see no reason. I've had no indication that we're in any way in a sort of challenge group or seen differently. But we're doing all we can to get to the front of that queue and be in a position to get that early opinion that we all hope for.
Thank you for that. Interesting, though, the commercial strategy is one of the commercial investment strategy is one of those factors. Because my understanding from other councils is that where the auditors have what they describe as an easy audit, where there's a relatively clean record and good things, they have been able to deal with those accounts quickly. But it's where there are complicated issues that tends to push us behind. And I did actually have a question on the investment strategy, and this might in fact impact the position in the audit, which is the valuation of the underlying capital in terms of capital growth and valuations, because that has an impact on the balance sheet of the council, albeit not necessarily on the P&L. Is that a consideration in your view?
It's certainly a consideration. Is it something that's a significant complicating factor? I don't think it is, albeit one of the things that we have been subject to as part of our current external audit has been differing opinions on how to treat the valuation of assets over time. So that in a couple of areas, one of the delays in our audit has been differing advice on how to value those assets, which differs indeed from advice we've had from the same auditor previously. They're things we've worked through. It's drawing to a sort of favourable conclusion, but it has added additional time into the process overall.
Thank you, Oliver. Any further questions for us on this? All done. Okay, thank you. In that case, we conclude we considered and commented on the financial performance for the financial year 2022-23 as detailed in Appendix 1 and summarised in paragraph 3.2. So we've considered and commented as necessary. Thank you for your questions. And so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item 4, which is the Local Code of Corporate Governance. And again, Oliver, I understand you're presenting the report in Karen and Deborah's absence. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'm here. I would like to turn now to the Local Code of Corporate Governance. This is a key document that lays out the framework through which the Council seeks to demonstrate our commitment to good corporate governance. The code contains 7 principles which are clearly laid out within the attached report. There has been a a sort of thorough sort of root and branch review of this document this year. We have as well gone out to some external parties to seek some independent verification of it and to get some input on the document as well. But the fundamental changes this year are the redesign to include the arrangements that we have that show our compliance with the SIPFA principles, which you may have recalled seeing at a recent meeting, an update in line with our new governance arrangements, and also just a review and a refresh of the documents held on the Council's website. But hopefully you'll see a sort of very clear articulation of all the internal sort of controls and arrangements we have in place to demonstrate that commitment to those 7 principles. I commend the report to you, and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Oliver. And personally, may I say how I think this document is, the readability of it is a great improvement on its predecessor, and I very much welcome that. So thank you for that. So questions, councillors, on this agenda item? Do we have any? Councillor Gray.
Probably a reflection. So I would totally agree with you, Mr. Morley, around the comprehensive work that's gone into this. Very difficult to look down there and see things that, is very coherent. It runs from one thing to another. Those sort of principles of, assigning responsibilities in the right directions, oversight, trust, verify, all that kind of thing, all seems to be well embedded inside there. I guess I would just be interested in your reflection as to the capacity of the organisation to deliver and actually effectively carry all of this out, because I obviously know HTC reasonably well, and whilst I don't know it quite as well now as I did 12 months ago, I'm struggling to think that it would have dramatically changed in that time. And some of this here looks like pretty stretching stuff. New things, responsibilities that officers traditionally haven't stepped up to take on board. Some things here councillors may not be used to getting involved in. And in addition, I think there's the ongoing question around resourcing for our internal audit department and whether or not they're overstretched. And we may come on to that later on, Chairman, as to that. So I think in principle, this all looks very strong, and I'm very supportive of it. But my question to you is, as the interim managing director, realistically, what is the capacity of the organisation to carry it?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Gray. So I'd answer the question in 2 parts, I think. So as I've communicated to all of you recently, we have had a challenge in terms of external appointment we made not having joined the organisation. So that's the capacity at the top table at the moment is stretched, and that's something that I'm working very, very hard to address. So there are, I remain acutely aware of the challenge of capacity in the organisation as a whole, and I'm acting, very, very strongly to manage that. So that would be the first point. The second is, what we've worked hard to do over a period of time is ensure that as much of this is embedded within core working as it possibly can be. So rather than it being additional tasks that we're asking people to do. So for instance, within service planning this year, it's the first time in my history in the council where we've got full compliance, full sets of service plans on the deadline from every service moving forward. You smile, I think you recognise some of the challenges in the past on that. And members will be seeing at scrutiny next week the new performance measures across the organisation. All of those have set targets. There'll be regular review and update on those. So is the challenge? Is it a difficult environment? Is capacity stretched? Yes, it is. I think increasingly we've got processes and measures that will enable us to act swiftly where there are challenges down the line. In addition to that, there's already been recognition around the table. I think a number of key appointments recently, the likes of Karen Sutton, the likes of Liz Smith as our Chief Delivery Officer, who some of you may know, have really strengthened some of those kind of core internal governance arrangements and made sure that we have people who are very much on these issues and escalating them very, very quickly.
Thank you, Oliver. Any other questions, comments on this document, please? Okay. If not, then we are required for this document to refer to provide a show of hands on the document for its acceptance. So the proposal is to review and endorse the new April 2023 Local Code of Corporate Governance. Can I see those in favour of that, please? That's unanimous. Thank you all. Moving on to agenda item 5, the peer review update. Oliver, this will be over to you again to introduce and speak on this these documents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to introduce this item, then hand over to Oliver. I think, as you know, we're a new administration, or relatively new administration, and as part of that, as we just discussed in the previous item, we've had quite a large change in management as well. So this particular peer review was something to look at our internal audit function and just to see whether it meets the requirements of the organisation. And I think it's always helpful to have a peer review just to ensure that you're doing the right thing. So I think it's a good thing, and I highly support this activity. But I'm going to hand over to Oliver.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hassel. So for those of you who aren't aware of what the Local Government Association do and some of the services they offer peer reviews of a range of services, and this is an opportunity that we've taken advantage of in the past in terms of areas like communications, and an independent peer team will come in and review your current arrangements, benchmark that against their knowledge and experience elsewhere, and make a series of recommendations. I think it's fair to say that given the sort of, the significant change that the report identifies in terms of political turnover, but also officer turnover, there's very real commitment on all sides to gain the benefit of that external perspective in terms of our approach to audit and the services that they offer. I think in headline terms, what I would say was it was a really positive experience. As somebody who personally contributed to the review and spent time with the audit team, I think there were a really sort of knowledgeable and talented group who brought different perspectives from different parts of the country around how we can maximise the benefits that the audit offers us. So I think in terms of the review as a whole, there were a number of recommendations. I think a number of them is sort of headed towards things that, as a panel, you've raised with us as officers before. So that increased focus and that continue that journey on commitment that we have around risk and using risk increasingly to target audit work was one of the recommendations that came out. One of the other areas that I think was really well considered was the desire to use the audit function not just as a sort of compliance function to go in and check the kind of controls environments in areas, but also increasingly with the dynamic environment that we're operating as an advisory team to go in and make recommendations and suggestions in new areas of activity to make sure that as you're establishing new ways of working and new control environments, they benefit from that perspective from audit straight off the bat. And as somebody who's really recently been involved in rebaselining our ICT recharge process, that is something that we've taken advantage of already, getting audit to come in and make recommendations in that area, and a lot of value has flown, flowed from that. So that was another recommendation that landed well, as well as the opportunity to the comment around the internal controls environment, which we've just talked about, the move to an assurance board, and that greater reflection on some of the points that Councillor Gray picked up were recognised too. Again, referenced around the table already. There are some challenges that were picked up within the report, so the need for a more detailed audit delivery plan with links back to a key resource plan and making sure we have enough resource available to deliver the activity that's scheduled, not least given the sort of changing environment that we are operating within. Overall, there were 17 recommendations, and it's fair to say that having sat down with the leadership of corporate governance, with Councillor Hassel as the appropriate portfolio holder, and with myself, with Karen Sutton as Section 151 officer, and Deborah as Chief Internal Auditor, we've agreed to all 17 recommendations, and we'll be developing a plan to bring those forward over time. Not all of them will be developed immediately, but for us, they seem to make an awful lot of sense. And kind of confirm an approach that generally we were heading towards, but that external perspective has been incredibly helpful. So for us, a very positive process, a lot of useful input there, and again, I'm more than happy to commend it to you as a committee.
Thank you, Oliver. I would expect there'll be plenty of questions on this agenda item. So, councillors, over to you. Questions? Maybe not, I was going to say. Councillor Jennings, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I may be asking things that have been answered in previous corporate governance committees, so excuse my greenness behind the ears, but I just had a couple of points on the main report, actually, just to ask a couple of questions for my own peace of mind, really. It talks about a new strategic risk register that's been brought in. I didn't know whether that's already been brought to this committee or are there any plans in the future to bring so. I was interested to see what the actual current resources of the internal audit team are, but I guess that's partly answered by the fact that there needs to be the calculation of what chargeable time, etc. But to give me an idea, I don't know whether we're talking about, 1 or 2 heads or whether we're talking 5 or whatever. And the third one was just, there was the reference to the new assurance board, but there wasn't anything else in the paper that told me what the assurance board was. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Jennings. So the first reference to the corporate risk register. So this isn't a new document. We've always had a corporate risk register, but what we did undertake last year was a fairly fundamental review of that corporate risk register that then informed all of service planning activity and took place in 2022, a sort of fundamental review post-COVID of the sort of what was contained within that. So that's what's referred to in the document. That has been to this committee on a number of occasions. And one of the recommendations that came out of the peer review was traditionally our last risk strategy that was produced was in 2017. And what that contained was a commitment to 2 separate risk registers, what was known as a strategic risk register or a corporate risk register, and then a series of service risks. And they were always held separately, reviewed regularly, but held separately. One of the things that we've agreed to do is actually move to a single risk register. So recognizing that some things span the entire organization and some things are for individual services. Nonetheless, the key issue is, what is the inherent risk and what's the mitigated risk post treatment. So that is a recommendation that we are taking on board, and that new refreshed corporate risk register is scheduled to come back to this next committee, so you can have visibility of those risks. In terms of the capacity of the audit function itself, so we have an internal audit manager and traditionally 2 auditors that sit alongside. They're not full-time posts, so I would have to completely check, but my understanding is it's about 2.2 FTE of that order. I can clarify after the meeting, Councillor Jennings, is traditionally the sort of scale of the internal audit function, which in broad terms, and this is a non-professional judgment, but in broad terms is comparable to the kind of level of audit resource that's available in other councils. But there has been much more turnover within that team than has traditionally been the case, certainly from a Hunt's perspective. So one of the auditors has left on maternity leave, and one of the others has transferred to another role in the council. So there has just been a bit more sort of churn and turnover than would normally be the case. And apologies, you had a third question and I didn't jot it down. Oh, fine. Yes, the assurance board. Okay. So traditionally, we operated with a single senior leadership team. So we had a meeting called senior leadership team that dealt with absolutely everything we dealt with. We met weekly on a Tuesday, and we picked up absolutely everything. Now, increasingly, what we've moved to is more dedicated, focused senior leadership teams. We still have a senior leadership team every week, but we have ones with much tighter accountabilities and different chairing. So whilst the membership remains largely the same, it makes sure that we remain the absolute focus on the specific issues. The assurance board looks at issues of risk, escalation, internal governance, and compliance, and is chaired by Karen Sutton as our Section 151 officer. So he's just giving greater visibility and accountability around that specific function rather than a more general senior leadership team that seeks to deal with everything at exactly the same time. And Deborah Moss, as internal auditor, serves on that alongside Liz Smith, who I referenced earlier as our Chief Delivery Officer, and a range of people who operate in that kind of assurance and controls environment.
Thank you, Ivor. Other questions on this agenda item? Councillor Hodgson-Jones.
Thank you. Just picking up on the size of the internal audit function, and the size of around 2.5 is a reasonable amount given the size of the organisation. But that creates issues of resilience. And you mentioned staff turnover and churn, and that gives me more concern over the resilience of the team. Have you considered what options there are to increasing the resilience of that function? Because it is a key governance issue, and if the internal audit function fails, then it creates far more risk for the organisation than if other small units should fail.
It's an excellent point, Councillor Hodgson-Jones. And this is an area that we have looked at historically and continue to kind of keep very much at the forefront of our mind. So as some members may be aware, we have a range of shared service operations, so ICT and legal already. There is an existing shared service arrangement on audit between South Cambs and Cambridge City. So to give an order of kind of scale, I think there might be 4 or 5 auditors across the 2 councils. There's a bit more complexity in those 2 councils, and they both run housing revenues accounts, which are kind of high risk sort of financial areas. We have had conversations in the past with the 2C audit function about the potential for either joining or potentially them providing some kind of resilience model in the event of us having additional needs. They're things we've looked at in the past. We've also had conversations with, there is I think it's a 7-council audit function in Hertfordshire that takes in all of the councils. We've had conversations with them historically as well. And also one of the areas that I'm interested in is if you look at a lot of our risk, it's nested kind of vertically with some of the other partners operating in our space, whether that's the county council or health, and whether there might be any appetite in those areas. So that's some of the historic area. It remains a live issue, but I think as we move through this process, we will consider that in the round and consider if there are steps we need to take in that way. But certainly they are things that we've looked at historically.
Thank you, Ivor. Further questions? Yeah, please do.
Thank you. Just to say that, yes, I'm familiar with the Hertfordshire Shared Internal Audit Service, and I would flag that whilst it brings benefits in terms of resilience, it does bring its own governance issues and management issues. And one does have to look at the range of organisations that are involved, and where there is a housing revenue account, it does actually create a lot more risk, and you don't want to be picking up some of those accidentally and some of the workload as well. So it's something to keep under review, but don't just dive in.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Gray.
Just one. Pleased to hear you welcome all 17 of those recommendations. Do you have a plan for how you're going to implement them, and would you be able to share that with the next committee meeting?
A plan is an active development would be my response. Am I happy to share the plan with this committee? Absolutely. Given the next meeting of this committee, I think is the first week in July, I might not be in a position to have a fully worked up plan for that meeting, but I'd certainly bring one back to subsequent meetings. I think that the key recommendation, as I've mentioned already, I think, is that increased focus of audit activity against the kind of risk-based approach. And what you'll absolutely see, and I've already committed to next time round, is that refreshed risk strategy coming back to enable you as a committee to have a look at that, to provide your own input to ensure that we're heading in that right direction. And then certainly to a subsequent meeting, I'll happily bring back a plan against the delivery of this over the course of the municipal year.
Thank you, Oliver. So happy with the response? Thank you. Any further questions, Tom? Okay. In that case, you have been asked to consider the recommendations in the report, and can I see a show of hands, please, for your acceptance of them? Those in favour? Thank you, councillors. I think that's unanimous again. Thank you. So moving on to item 6, the Corporate Governance Committee Progress Report. Harry, hand over to Habs for you for this item, please. Thank you, Habs.
Thank you, Chair. First item on the progress report is the Code of Procurement waiver procedure. At the last meeting I reported there was 2 uses underway. One has since been abandoned and the other is in progress. So we'll get further details on that in due course. In terms of the appointment of independent member to the Corporate Governance Committee, I am aware, I think Karen was going to give an update on this, but I am aware that things are developing behind the scenes and there are plans to liaise with chair, vice chair and the executive councillor on a way forward. So things are progressing behind the scenes on that one. And then with regards to the shadow cabinet members, so that was raised at the last meeting, so we've popped it on the progress report. That is the position as it is at the moment. I don't know whether or not anything further wants to be added by Oliver at this stage.
Just to say, I've very clearly heard the desire of the review of the Constitution, and one of the suggestions has been a recognition of the shadow cabinet members. Other items have been raised with me as well in terms of changes to the Constitution. For some of the reasons that Councillor Gray outlined earlier, capacity remains a challenge. So I'm happy to commit to review. At the moment, I can't give precise timeframes around that, but I'm happy to go on record that a review will take place in due course, and I'll bring it back to this committee. I'm more than happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Oliver. Do you have questions on the progress report? Any of the 3 items in question? No questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Habs, and to Oliver for your contributions there. And with that, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your attendance this evening.